I think there is the sense that the White House is growing frustrated at this, that they're running out of options, they're running out of enthusiasm. I mean, this could potentially be the last roll of the dice for them before, as Marco Rubio said, they walk away.
Now, as promised, Harriet Alexander, our colleague in the United States, is on the line to talk to all of us. Hi to you, Harriet.
Hello, John.
Hi. Well, I mean, loads been going on your front. So many disparate stories in their own way, interesting, some more important than the other. But I mean, sometimes it's hard to distinguish the ones you want to talk about and the ones that you don't. It's like a flooding the zone was how that presidential advisor Steve Bannon, and the flood just keeps on coming. There's some serious stuff in there as well, though, isn't there, Harriet? I mean, the news of that, well, a retreat from Donald Trump on the tariffs against China. I think he presented as a kind of tactical victory, but I was talking to a voice who was formerly of the Chinese central bank who said it's purely a retreat. And even if you say that, I suppose he would say that, logically this was a retreat by Donald Trump from where he was under pressure, Harriet, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And the stock market is certainly seeing it as such. They are celebrating. Wall Street is on a rip right now because they are very pleased that these tariffs have been suspended for 90 days. It's worth noting that it's not all the tariffs. It doesn't include, for instance, the tariffs on cars, on steel, on aluminium, and potentially on pharmaceutical products. But yes, it is on a wide range of products. And Trump has already said that he doesn't think it will be reintroduced at the level that it was before. Yes, I think it can be called a reversal. Yeah,
interesting sort of line of conversation that Donald Trump would never really appreciate what he was getting into. He did not appreciate the power of the Chinese economy to adapt to the pressure he was putting on them and to just change their business model.
Well, I actually think there's another way of looking at it. There is a world where you can say that China was forced to come to the table quicker than it could have done because the amount of pain it was trying to inflict back on the US was also just unsustainable for its own economy, which is so dependent on exports. So, yes, I mean, while the ridiculous numbers that the escalation got to, and obviously that was all sparked by Washington and Donald Trump, was sort of just seemingly preposterous. I do think it is interesting how, because of course China has dropped its own tariffs, and I think it's dropped them to quite a low level comparatively. So I don't know. It is interesting. The Chinese economy, while strong, it does have its weaknesses and it has its difficulties right now. And there is a school of thought that this fight was almost a bit coming too late, but it had to come at one point between these two economic superpowers.
Well, there is clear evidence of reversal on what Trump said, certainly on Liberation Day and before then. That said, the narrative which he's setting up is, I am getting something country by country out of these confrontations. In other words, there are concessions. I mean, either the Chinese removing their own tariffs or moderate tariffs staying in place, which will give the US Treasury some extra money. So, he's playing up to the idea that he's a bit of a unpredictable wild gambler, but he will also be saying that he's got something back from this, and that's certainly what his officials are arguing, that this is the art of the deal.
Yeah, well, the trade war hasn't been good for anyone, but I mean, and that goes for China, that goes for the United States. But I keep on reading. I'm reading just today, the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, about the Chinese economy retrenching, and it's now in the business of just developing its internal markets, finding alternative markets in the world. It's not going to go back to trading with America on the terms that it did before. There will be an inflationary effect, and the pressure on Trump has been actually quite colossal. I mean, I don't know if you saw those reports the other day of container traffic practically drying up. The port of Seattle, huge container port, it was empty.
Yeah, and
there was
the
nothing
port of
there.
Los Angeles. I mean, it is quite clear that one consequence of this will be that the volume of trade overall with the United States will go down, and as you say, people will look for alternative routes for trade. However, the US economy is going to remain the largest in the world and pretty central to most exporters. They are just going to have to pay more for access to those markets, and American consumers are going to have to pay more for consuming them.
Which carries a political price.
Yeah.
It's the reverse of what they were promised at election time.
Well, you can make an argument because they were also promised that some jobs will be repatriated.
Which is in doubt. I mean, some will. The idea of the sort of whole-scale reshoring of jobs that were lost to America, I think there's a pretty strong view that's just not going to happen.
No, it's very unlikely to happen. But Trump is a master of the political theatre, and he may well argue, I'm looking after your interests, I got tough and I got something back.
And he has, I think, managed to deliver a blow to China. And what you said about China looking to boost its internal markets is absolutely true, but it is easier said than done. China has been trying this for a while, but there are also structural problems within the Chinese economy, including the fact that its consumers are just very hesitant to spend. One thing, I think I saw a statistic that Chinese people tend to save something like 40% of their paycheck, a very high amount, because there's a very limited welfare state. People just save a lot, they do not spend a lot, they are encouraged that way. So unless China really reforms its own systems and economy, the US is going to remain a giant market for them.
Yeah, Adam Boulton's here, Anna Mihailova's here, Harriet Alexander's there in the USA. Just a word about Ukraine, guys. Your thoughts on that? Because so much now, well, it's not a new thing, but Thursday the meeting in Istanbul, assuming it goes ahead, with Putin at the table, Zelensky at the table, Donald Trump today saying he's willing to be at the table. Do you feel more optimistic about something coming from that? Well, I talked to people today in Kyiv, in Europe, around the place, so sceptical. What do you think, Adam?
Well, I think Zelensky will definitely go there. That's one of the ways that he's trying to regain the initiative. And of course, we saw he appeared to regain his relationship with Trump at the Pope's funeral. Whether Putin turns up or not, I think, is very much an open question. And it seems to me that only if he's absolutely certain that Putin turns up will Trump turn up. So do I expect rapid progress? No. On the other hand, I think Putin's behaviour has been quite puzzling in recent days. And
why do you say that?
Well, calling a press conference at 1:30 in the morning, as he did over the weekend, to announce your own terms for accepting these negotiations does suggest that he is, at the very least, thrashing out in his mind how he can play this. Now, there's still excessive demands coming from Russia, so you either conclude that Russia is making those demands because it expects to be knocked down, or Russia is making those demands because it expects Trump to come to its side and argue for them. And I think, as far as we can tell, Trump's overt support for Russia has not played well with public opinion, and he is, probably moving away from basically just saying let Putin have everything.
What do you, Anne, I'll get your thoughts in a second, Anna. Harriet, what did you make of Donald Trump's behaviour in this? I mean, on Saturday we had those leaders, the European leaders. There was Starmer, there was Macron, there was Merz of Germany, there was the Polish leader, all of them saying they had Donald Trump's agreement, that they were all standing in a line, arms linked, telling Putin, ceasefire and talks or we will all come down on you like a ton of bricks. Within 24 hours, Harriet, Donald Trump was saying nothing like that. He was saying, look, we're going to have talks without conditions. So either he never gave that assurance to the European leaders, or he did and he changed his mind.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Trump is all over the place on this, isn't he? I mean, on Saturday, he was very much on the side of Britain, France, Germany, Poland, when they said that there needed to be this unconditional 30-day ceasefire. By Sunday, he was saying he thought it was unlikely that Ukraine was going to make a deal with Putin. And then today he's saying, well, let's see what happens in Turkey. I think it's going to be very positive. I mean, there is so much smoke smoke and mirrors with Trump. His fans like to think that this is because he has the mastery of what's going on and he likes to sort of wrong foot people, keep them on their toes. It's very notable that every time that Putin makes a move, that Trump shifts his position to support that. This idea of the 30-day ceasefire was very quickly discarded when Putin stopped talking about it. So I think it's all over the place. And I think there is the sense that the White House is growing frustrated at this, that they're running out of options, they're running out of enthusiasm. I mean, this could potentially be the last roll of the dice for them before, as Marco Rubio said, they walk away. And that would definitely please people within the White House, like J.D. Vance, who really wants nothing to do with it.
What are you thinking, Anna?
I think it's really unlikely that Trump shows up on Thursday just because he doesn't want, if more, like Harriet says, he's increasingly sending signals that he's trying to actually step away and disengage a bit. Again, I would also be very... I mean, it's all like a big high-stakes game of poker now. So Putin effectively called the West bluff by throwing a complete spanner in the works and ignoring their ceasefire demand and saying, let's do this meeting instead, almost as if he knows that Donald Trump does have this quality that sometimes he takes the position of whoever he last spoke to. A lot of people who've worked with him do report that sort of malleability, and that really did look like an example of it. So Putin makes that statement and then Trump comes out in support over the weekend, which essentially looked like it backs it up. But normally in negotiations, the principals only meet when something's been agreed behind the scenes and they're ready to sign. So once again, we're in a completely extraordinary set of events, because if this meeting does happen between Putin and Zelensky, it'll be really significant. The normal scenario, and it would have still been a breakthrough, is to have their foreign secretaries meet, for example. Yes.
Now, look, I want to move on, because in the few minutes we've got left, I mean, lower perhaps down the scale of seriousness on a global scale, but still matters of principle involved. The Qataris, Donald Trump off late tonight, heading towards the Gulf states, including Qatar, who we now know are gifting a $400 million jumbo jet to serve as Air Force One, and it's going to be available to Donald Trump after he leaves office, assuming he does leave office, for his own use. It's going to be given to the presidential library. He can do what he wants with it. And Harriet, in Washington, the Democrats are making a bit of a fuss about that, maybe understandably.
Yes, indeed. Chris Murphy, who's a Democrat senator, he described this as nuclear-grade graft because he says that the Trump administration, the Trump family, have got so many business deals in that part of the world, in Qatar, that it's unthinkable. It should be unthinkable that this jet is being given as a gift. Now, Trump actually got quite angry when he was asked just a few hours ago, as he was leaving, when he was asked whether this was acceptable. He said that the journalist who asked that question should be embarrassed of having asked it. But it's true that it is the biggest gift ever from a foreign power to the United States president. Trump, of course, says it's for the Department of Defense. It's not for him. He says that it will afterwards go to his presidential library, whatever that means. But it was interesting hearing the ethics lawyer for the George W. Bush administration, who says that this is absolutely unacceptable unless it is approved by Congress. That's something that seems very unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
It is a straightforward violation of US law, which states that people in public office must not accept gifts from foreign entities. That said, I was at a talk the other day by the editor of The Atlantic magazine, a successful sort of American magazine, and he made this remark. He said, every day in America now is a new Watergate. In other words, there is a fresh violation of the law committed by the president, which he appears to get away with. And
flooding the zone.
Yeah, well, it's not even flooding the zone. It's just, your rules don't apply to me, really.
Except that they do. There's the Emoluments Act, which makes that, as you say, explicitly illegal.
But they don't. And remember, the Supreme Court has ruled that anything the president does in the pursuance of his duties, and presumably flying around, is not something that he can be held accountable for. So he's going to get away with this. I mean, as far as the presidential library is concerned, it has now become popular for presidents. I mean, certainly George Bush Sr. did this to have the sort of fuselage of Air Force One in their museum for tourists to go and see. So if that's where it's going to end up, you could argue that, you know, it's going to save the donors to the presidential library, including the American taxpayers, some money by getting a freebie from Qatar.
Wouldn't you guess it's at least as likely that the 747 is going to have its livery changed rather and become its own vast private jet?
Well, at least it's a Boeing, isn't it? But it's not good news for the Boeing Corporation because it's something they've already sold.
I would just comment on the pictures. They are extraordinary.
Of the interior.
Yeah. I mean, I would say hideous, but also very Donald Trump in Trump Tower in style, I think.
Lots
Qataris
of
know how to
white
appeal
leather
to
and
him.
gold everywhere. Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether they'll put press seats in it because you know how it is on Air Force One that they have different classes of seats and you can only move backwards in the plane. You can't move forward. So the press seats are just standard economy class seats at the back of the plane, so they can only move forward to talk to the president if invited.
Yes.
But, you know, where does that fit in with the palatial splendour? Perhaps you'll just dispense with the press altogether.
Well, I don't know, we're sort of heading that way. Just have a few podcasters, and everyone else can just get their own plane on public transport.
Mine, I've got to say, I did with Gordon Brown. We flew on Colonel Gaddafi's
I was on
BG
that trip.
jet.
I was
you
on
remember
that
it?
jet. Yeah. There was lots of leather on there.
Leather on that and a fish tank and.
We flew into the desert and landed by tent. Yeah, those were the days, Adam. And also, I've left this for last, but it's, and also wrongly, actually. I mean, Harriet Alexander, serious talk about the suspension of habeas corpus in the White House. That is the ancient right not to be detained by the state without recourse to the courts. And now it's been discussed by a presidential advisor as something they might rather like to do in the course of immigration control, Harriet.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is quite shocking, really, to many legal scholars. Stephen Miller, a very senior, very influential aide to Donald Trump, he said that habeas corpus is a privilege and that Trump was actively looking at suspending it. I mean, this is something that has been U.S. policy for decades. It's actually in the Constitution that habeas corpus can't be suspended unless in cases of rebellion or invasion. And so he would be arguing that it's necessary, but yes, up in arms and can only be suspended by Congress.
Yeah, it's a power that was used in Hawaii only after the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was used. Abraham Lincoln tried to use it during the course of the American Civil War, and he was pulled up by Congress, and that's being used as an instrument of immigration.
But Trump has already activated an 18th century emergency act on the subject of immigration, so you know it's consistent with that. It's an authoritarian gesture, and this man Steve Miller, I mean, we haven't heard of him, he's the deputy chief of staff, but he is the true ideologue of Trumpism, and he's also the person who knows how to implement it. So he's someone, whether you like him or not, worth listening to.
But just to play devil's advocate, I do think that habeas corpus, a lot of this is signalling. It's signalling to people, don't come to this country, you're not welcome, and you won't have proper rights, even if you do. So going back to Keir Starmer and the government here's approach to migration, maybe signalling is the right way to do it.
But it's changing America. I mean, the other thing that is going to the Supreme Court is the so-called birthright.
Yes.
That being born in America, you automatically qualify for citizenship. Trump's fighting that as well.